All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Hello again, and welcome back to Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I am Dr. Jay Warren. I'm your host of the podcast, as well as the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego at the Cap Wellness Center. And you listeners have spoken, and I am now listening to you by putting this episode together. I've had a number of requests from you, emails coming in a lot just in the last couple months about this topic, about bringing a new baby home and how do we help the older child or children navigate that. I love that, one, you're reaching out and asking for topics. I love, too, that you're adding to your families and bringing more babies into the world, obviously. But I also love that you're being proactive. You're thinking ahead and wanting to find out more about what this transition is going to be like, what to expect, what's normal, what's not normal, and how to get help with it. So I'm happy to put this together. And I brought Sophie Acott onto the podcast to help explore that. She herself is a mom of 4, so she's done this many times herself, but also she is an expert in maternal and child sleep. So she's a sleep coach in that way, but she's done a lot of work with hand in hand and does work with parenting by connection. And by blending those two worlds as a sleep consultant and a parent coach, she has a lot to share on this and just really great tools that's going to help this just be a lot more peaceful, a lot more easy on everyone, and just start off the family with another addition that much easier. So I'm going to bring her on in a second. I'll introduce her in a second. I'll have you listen to this message first, and then we'll get right to it. My online course, Connecting with Baby During Pregnancy, has been out for a while now, and I've been getting phenomenal feedback from you women who have been learning these prenatal bonding techniques, putting them to use, and having amazing results. The same kind of results that the women in the Rafi study were getting, where by doing these techniques throughout pregnancy, they were having less anxiety and pain during labor. They're needing less obstetrical interventions, including less C-sections. And then afterwards, the babies are sleeping better, which means you're sleeping better. And postpartum depression was less than 1% in the moms who did these techniques. So go over to my website at drjwarren.com/CWB and learn all about it. I think this course is amazing. I put a lot of effort into it, and I think it'll really help you have a healthier, happier, and more relaxed pregnancy and a gentler yet powerful birth. All right, my guest today is Sophie Acott. She is the founder of Sleep, Play, Love, whose mission is to help parents all over the world reclaim much-needed sleep, rest, and joy to their parenting experience. She is a mother of 4 children, a homebirth enthusiast, and a conscious parenting advocate. Having experienced firsthand the toll that lack of sleep can have on health, emotional well-being, relationships, and the entire family unit, Sophie is committed to supporting other families to overcome their own unique parenting and sleep challenges, restoring vibrancy, happiness, and harmony to the family unit. As a certified life coach, a maternity and child sleep consultant, motivating and inspiring others is Sophie's life passion. Having trained with hand-in-hand parenting, she adopts the parenting by connection approach, personally and professionally, living and breathing this philosophy with their own children and empowering other parents to success through deeper understanding of the synonymous relationship between the parent-child connection and sleep and behavioral challenges. So now let me switch over to my conversation with Sophie. All right, Sophie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. J. It's good to be here.
Yes, this is a very anxiously awaited topic. There's a lot of
Yes.
parents out there that are wanting help because as we started this show years ago, it was mostly first-time parents. Now these second and third-time parents are saying, oh man, I got a new baby coming home, and what do we do for the older ones? So you
help.
Reaching out, help is what they're looking for. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect because you obviously as your expertise in maternity and child sleep consultancy, you're dealing with that a lot. Any kind of interruption in life is going to change things. And I know as a mom too, you've dealt with that a lot. So tell us about like how your path, like one as a parent, but then also the work that you're doing and your book.
Yes, certainly. So I find it's all intertwined, really. So where I am now is basically, I think it was a real personal journey for me with my children.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, I have 4 kids, and I live now, obviously from the accent, you'd pick that I'm from Australia originally,
Yes.
and moved to San Diego with my husband and 3 kids at the time, in the last 2 years, and had our 4th here last year, which was lovely. 4th and final, no more for me.
Very good. Congratulations.
And I really found a passion for sleep work, particularly around 5 years ago when my second, after my second was born, he had colic. So he was awake and crying what seemed hourly, like or continuously during the day. And then he was up feeding and crying every hour pretty much overnight up until like 5 months. And I was exhausted and I got really sick and I was really struggling to cope with like just everyday life. And also I had a toddler at the time, so that was quite demanding.
Yes.
Trying to
that's a lot.
Their needs, oh my goodness, their needs and wants are just not being physically or emotionally prepared or capable to handle it. So we ended up getting a sleep consultant to help us. And within a week, being able to actually sleep and having my son sleep longer stretches, like I felt so much better than I had in 5 months or since he'd been born. And I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, I need, like other people need to experience this. And knowing what such a big issue sleep can be for new parents, through my friends and through mothers groups, everybody has something to say about sleep, and usually they're not getting enough. So I decided to pursue my study in maternal and child sleep, and then I just started working with clients and helping them out, with their families and their younger children, and it sort of extended, I guess, to more than sleep. And I think my interest too from sleep into more parenting came from my experience with my own children. So once we'd sort of overcome the sleep difficulty, so to speak, I'm navigating this territory of toddlerhood, and I found that I was getting into these power struggles and, that screaming and trying to kind of dish out punishments and that sort of thing, which didn't work. And I felt really quite defeated, and I'd feel guilty and, didn't do anything to change my children's behavior in the long term. So I started researching different parenting, methods and strategies, something that that felt in alignment with what I wanted to do, really bring in a harmonious, joy into the family and not be sort of engaging in these, like I said before, these power struggles every day, because it felt like I was just really, pushing stuff up a hill like all the time. So I looked into RIE, which, Janet Lansbury, and started implementing some of those principles. And then I also got into hand-in-hand parenting, which is by Patty Wipfler, and she does parenting by connection, and ended up, sort of long story short, after doing a few courses with Hand in Hand, I did my instructor certification. And the basis of the parenting by connection approach is really, I guess, understanding children's emotions, positive discipline, so no punishments or timeouts or anything like that, and really working on, the parent-child connection to improve, behavioural difficulties that parents face parenting their children. And with all of those, like I had started applying them, with all of my children and seeing these amazing, if you like, results or experiences and just the connection between us, I felt we became so much stronger, and our bonds became, greater. And I just had all these tools, I felt, in my parenting toolbox to be able to handle most difficulties that came my way. Obviously, there's always challenges, but I felt it was a really good fit for us. And I started applying all those principles to my sleep work as well, and with outstanding results. So really focusing, instead of what I had been doing when I first started my business, very much focused on behavioural methods. So depending on what the family was after or what they felt was suitable, we would sometimes do cry it out, sometimes do, sleep lady shuffle. That's a thing.
Right.
Pick up, put down, which you've probably heard of some of these, which were, I guess, it's the old school way of doing things, and it's what a lot of sleep consultants actually do with their clients. But what I found in previously having done that is that they were only really ever good for a certain amount of time. So, I'd get so many parents contacting me 3 months down the track after having worked together, and what they were using or doing, no longer kind of works. They've hit another milestone in the road with development. They've been on holidays, or their child's been sick, or, they've been potty training, or there's been some transition that has caused sleep to regress, and what they were doing previously doesn't work anymore. And all of a sudden they're left with no tools in their parenting toolbox, and they're contacting me for help again to try and get them back on track. And what I found with using the parenting by connection approach and adapting that to my sleep work, that the results were more sustainable, that the results from using the connection tools and, focusing on the parent-child connection actually, yes, it could improve sleep, but also improve behaviour, because most negative behaviours, and I'm sure we'll go well into today, but most negative or undesirable behaviour stems from fear. And the same with sleep difficulties. Mostly, fear of separation. Children become afraid of the dark, afraid of monsters, afraid of being alone. So at the root of most difficult behaviours is fear. And so as parents, to counteract that, to pull in the safety and the love and make our children feel connected, through certain connection tools such as play, and I'll go into it further, I'm sure, today, can really help alleviate those problems that parents face.
Right. And do you find then that, like with this topic of bringing a new baby in, that those older siblings, it's really like a fear emotion that is what needs to be worked with, like the fear of things changing, or they just don't know what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be all of that. And, under fear, I think that banner can include sort of anxiety and insecurity. And I think children, when you do introduce a new sibling to the family, it disrupts pretty much everything in the child's routine.
Right.
They're forced to all of a sudden share their parents' attention with this brand new baby who they don't know, and a lot of them at the start don't really want them to be there.
Right.
So, feelings of disempowerment too, feeling that they don't have any control over the situation, which of course, they don't. And someone actually likened it to, I heard this a few years ago, but imagine if your husband came home and bought a new wife or a new girlfriend and just started kissing and cuddling them on the couch. Like, how would you feel?
Right.
Like, yeah, okay, that's a good point. All right, start
Yes.
putting myself in my daughters. That was sort of when I had my second child. Starting to put myself in their position and the empathy that it's a really big transition. And a lot of fear, a lot of fear of change. I mean, children are creatures of habit, as we are, and so they don't always like things to be changed. There's certain things that we can definitely do as parents, and I think one of them does stem from, communication, and we can do everything in the lead up to introducing a new sibling by communicating what's going to happen, how things are going to be different. Right. I don't think it's ever possible to just as when we have a baby for the first time, we could never understand the magnitude of the impact it's going to be on our life until it happens. So, but we can prepare them for it. And there's certain ways that we can do that. Like children learn a lot through play. So, doing certain role playing and everything like that. It's great for children, using dolls and teddies, and I know some kids love books as well. So the ones that we had at home were My New Baby, and I had my last 3 were home births. So we had Hello Baby, which is a really nice home birth story. So yeah.
And this is all in the lead up in the months before the birth that you're doing.
Yeah, things you can do like when mum's pregnant, things you can do to sort of try and prepare them as best as possible.
Right.
To try and counteract. I mean, there's still going to be that fear and insecurity no matter what you do. I think, we can't eliminate that. It's just a normal feeling for them to have. I think it's how we respond to them and obviously how we prepare them that does matter, though.
Right. So what are the typical challenges a kid will have, or behavioral issues or sleep or things that a parent should, one, kind of know is kind of a normal reaction, and then maybe if you, in your experience, if there's things that a parent's seeing in their older kid that's not so common and not so normal, should be on the lookout for?
Sure. A big one, I think, for children when you've brought baby home is, aggression.
Yeah, that's a big concern of a lot of parents.
It is, and I think, knowing how to best deal with that, it can be a bit of a sticky situation, if we don't feel equipped or if we don't feel confident enough in how to deal with it, it can be quite triggering as well, I think, for a lot of parents. Aggression is completely normal. Again, that stems from fear. And so I think if we can have the understanding that, hang on a minute, this my child's afraid for what's going to happen to them in the future, of what this change in family dynamics going to be, who this little person is. There's a lot of insecurity around their routine and what's just happened in their life. So having that empathy can sort of at least make us feel a little bit more less likely to get upset with them when we do witness aggressive outbursts. With aggression, I guess there's 2 different things we can do. We can be proactive. One of the tools that I get my clients to do daily, if they can, and this is to improve sleep and whatever behavioural difficulty they're experiencing, is one-on-one play. Okay. And so what this does, and it's really good because I know sometimes parents will feel like they've spent all day with their children and the thought of playing with them they just don't want to have to do play for hours on end, because children can get really caught up, and then parents start to get frustrated because they've got this list of things that need to be done. So I always recommend setting the alarm. So if you've got 10 minutes, set your timer for 10 minutes. The really good thing about that special time, the quality one-on-one time, is that your older child gets to choose what they do. And the power of that is that it's empowering for them, I guess, to be able to choose what they want to do. We make a million demands to them each day. Do this, do that, put your socks on, da, 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 da. So it's really nice for them to have that short window of time where they get to be the leader. So this is the time where we don't manipulate the play, we don't lead the play, we don't correct them. We just basically follow, and obviously the play within reason. We're not going to let them sort of run across the main street in their gumboots without any clothes on. But, whatever they want to do, it's really interesting that some of the activities that children will choose to play with their parents sort of serves as like therapy. They might act out things that are bothering them. It might stem down to, the transition with welcoming a new baby into the family. They might want to be the baby, for example. I know I experienced that with my 3rd child when I introduced my he wanted to be the baby all the time, and a lot of parents sort of feel like, is this the right thing to do, and feel that they might be, I guess, contributing to some kind of aggression if they do play along. But I think it's a really wonderful way for our children to feel acknowledged. If they want to feel like a baby, that we do, even if it's just that 10 minutes on the timer, in our own time for that special time, that they be the baby, then to sort of nurture that and go with it. and see, and I mean, that's just one example of how children will try and play out, what's going on in their lives and make sense of it and connect and overcome their fears. But there's other ways that they act it out through play. So it's really good to let them lead. That's a positive thing.
Is that related to all the clinginess that the babies or the kiddos can go through beforehand? Is it that same kind of thing, like wanting to kind of be the baby, get the attention in that type of way? Or is that different?
Yeah. And clinginess can be a multitude of things. It can be obviously fear, like not wanting to have the separation. So separation anxiety is quite common when you introduce a new baby. So that's, I guess, it's still a fear thing, right? It's just on the other spectrum of aggression. So, not wanting to let the parent out of the sight, not wanting to be away, having that anxiety about mum leaving because there's so much change. And so the great thing about play is that it's all, how do we combat our children's fear, and pouring the connection and the love and the safety through play, and laughter especially, is a really good way for children to heal fears. So, whether that be, the transition we're talking about, or whether it's nightmares or something else that's bothering them. And how good you feel after a good laugh. If someone tells you a good joke, or, I don't know, like kids love it when adults walk into a wall. I don't know if you've ever done that. Doesn't Nico
Totally.
laugh at you?
Anything me being
like
silly breaks the tone.
Exactly. And they love it. Deep belly laugh, and can really help them to laugh away their fears. And I mean, Victor Borge said, didn't he, that laughter's the shortest distance between two people, and I think that's true. And especially when it comes to children and healing their fears. So yes, so separation anxiety and clinginess is very common. Also, I guess, children can, on the other end spectrum of that, can withdraw. I guess if they're, and it's probably more in cases where they're not getting the extra attention during the day. It's more common that you will experience clinginess or aggression rather than withdrawal, but it does happen for certain kids, and that's just obviously a protection mechanism. And I'd definitely be pouring in the connection in that respect. But tantrums, off track behaviour, all of that sort of stuff, which stems from just feeling insecure and searching for that connection with mum that they feel that they've temporarily lost. Yeah.
What about when you're talking about aggression, you're meaning kind of more like that, like outbursts and the like, or also, because some parents have worries about like being too rough with the baby. Not in a harming the baby, but they tend to be like, oh, look at the baby, and they're like mauling the kid, and and that's something they're trying, like, how do we exactly, how do we teach the kiddo to be gentle and things like that? And sometimes I think we've all seen them do that, but I think there is some intent to harm there, right. And it's like, and I think again that's like an attention thing, where the aggression too. I think when we're talking about children and their emotions, sometimes, I mean, children are built to search for connection day and night with their primary caregiver. A lot of the time it's mum, but obviously mum and dad as well. And when they feel that connection is lost, and on a daily basis, this can happen if you're on the phone or you're feeling stressed, or obviously if you're physically separated, you're not connected. And when they're feeling disconnected, or they can't sort of feel that presence from you, it feels like their limbic system kind of takes over, which is the emotional part of the brain, and their prefrontal cortex shuts down. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for memory and learning and logic. It knows not to smack the baby. It knows, consequences and that sort of thing. But when they're flooded by the emotional part of their brain, when they're not connected, you do see that off-track behaviour, the tantrums and that sort of thing ensue. And often children will engage in off-track behaviour in order for us to set a limit for them to rage against, which sounds like quite complex, but you quite often witness, like when you do set a limit, sweetheart, I can't let you hurt the baby, or I can't let you do that, that
that you do see some feelings come up, some anger, and they might start tantruming or crying. So a lot of that off-track behavior is just a first warning that, hey, I'm feeling a little bit insecure here. They might need just a hug from mum or dad, or just maybe 5 minutes of just one-on-one time, and we might be able to avoid that behavior. Although not always possible, I know. When we're busy feeding new babies and flooded with hormones and everything ourselves, I think that's, where the challenge lies sometimes.
Right. And especially like depending on the age of the older child, right? Like there's less and less prefrontal cortex to work with as the younger they are, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when you're talking about, some people have their babies like a year apart, and so it's very difficult to be able to set limits with children who are only sort of 12 or 14 months, who might not understand as much as what an older child would. So it would be age dependent on what you would do. And I think, coming to the age factor, is it easier to introduce a baby when you've got a much younger child, like a child still in diapers, or is it easier to have a child that's sort of 4 or 5? And
that's a good question.
I get asked that question quite a lot. I think there's pros and cons to everything. So the older the child is, the more they can understand, probably the more you can explain to them, and you can communicate a lot easier about the change and what's happening, and leading them up in preparing for the birth and the new baby. At the same time, the older the child is, the longer they've had mum and dad to themselves. Being sort of, in that attention without anyone to compete with. So that's probably the pros and cons there to an older child. And then the younger child, easier in a way, because they probably wouldn't remember life without the sibling. If you're talking about a child that's sort of 18 months old to 2 years, eventually, they're only young. I mean, most of them are still in diapers themselves. And the transition seems to be easier in the way that they, like I said, I guess they haven't had as much time with mum and dad, so they don't have, I don't know if that
like
really
their patterns aren't set up, and they're used to their rhythms are set up.
For like 4 or 5 years, but I mean, the hardest thing is you've got 2 babies, and so you said you're changing two lots of diapers. It's really harder. It's a lot harder to communicate with younger children,
right?
And prepare them adequately, and depending on how old they are, I mean, it's a lot more difficult to do sort of role play and one-on-one time with children who and do the role playing, the empowering role play, if they're sort of 15 or 16 months. It's not as effective.
Yeah, I mean, I only have my one son, so I haven't been through this directly myself, but with all the families that I work with here, I definitely see parents that have, like, say, a 2-year-old having a lot more challenges with this transition in the first couple months than the kids being older. I mean, as you just said, like, every age has its own set of challenges. It's not a cakewalk in any of them, but it's that 2-year-olds where, like, I mean, just 2-year-olds are difficult, period. Right?
Yes.
And then you add in another thing, and you got another newborn and sleep deprivation and all that goes on with that. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are parents that, like, actually think, like, when is the best time to have the next kid, and looking at that.
It's never a good time.
Exactly. I was just going to say, like, the best time is when you're doing it. Exactly. And then
I think if you think about it too much, you get in your head, and you'd never have another child. So just do it. I think coming from someone who's had 4, but I think it's, it's true. Like, just, thinking about what you just said then, like, with an older child too, I think it can be easier, because a lot of the time they might be at school. If you're talking about a 4 or 5-year-old, they're at preschool or school. Whereas a 2-year-old, I mean, a lot of 2-year-olds are still home with mum during the day, or dad, whoever it is. And, they're not going to preschool. Most, I can't really assume, can I? But most 2-year-olds who I know aren't going to preschool full time
right.
at that age. So, they're in the thick of it, you're going through that transition and you're home with the baby and the toddler. So it can be very anxiety provoking to say at best for parents. Yeah.
I think though, so that being said, I will say too that a lot of the second and third time parents, like moms and dads, they go into second and third time a little more, I don't want to say relaxed, but confident. They go in more confident because their older kid lived, they got through that newborn stage. So there is there's not as much of the gripped responsiveness that comes with like the first time parents. So that brings a less of a level of stress into it, which is good. Yes. But obviously like there's another factor in the equation when you got another little newborn that needs their own attention and the like.
Yes. And I find, it is one of those things mostly that the more children you have, the more relaxed you are. And I don't think it's a conscious decision. I think it's just the way it has to be.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, it's like I lose my 1-year-old throughout the house most days. Has anyone seen Luca? But it's like a little bit more relaxed. And instead of the 5, used to have a 5-second rule. It's now completely non-existent, really, with feet on the ground.
Yes.
But yeah, I think, there's a difference between, if you're introducing your third child, you've already gone through the process of introducing a new sibling, whereas with the second child, that's a whole new transition the parent has to go through, in themselves, in their whole parenting journey, as well as dealing with the children's emotions. Whereas, I find that parents are more comfortable when they're introducing their third child and consecutive children because they've dealt with that transition. Although obviously there's always going to be some teething pain, so to speak, introducing a new person. You've got, depending on how many children you've got in your family, it's a lot of different personalities. It's dealing with a new dynamic. And the more children you have, obviously the more feelings and emotions you have to be, I don't like to say manage, but, keep on top of and, be attentive to. That's right. So, I think it all has its own challenges for parents.
Right.
And I think really what comes down to the biggest thing that we can do to prepare for introducing a new baby, no matter if it's your second or your third or your fourth, is really having that support network. It's so important, for mum and dad. And, because, you might have the best intentions to have a pretty straightforward vaginal birth, but even those births can come with their own level of trauma. You might end up having a C-section and have a longer recovery time than what you thought. So having the infrastructure, having people who can take the older kids, pick them up from school or preschool, take them for play dates, get a meal train. Have you heard it? You've heard of
yes,
meal train?
Yes.
Yeah, which is an awesome idea. I did that with my fourth and had meals coming to me, like beautiful home cooked meals for like 2 weeks. Which is so nice. You don't want to be cooking yourself, and you don't want to be living off takeaway food. So to be able to have home cooked food and all your friends supporting you in that way really makes that process easier. Especially engaging in, the help to just saying yes is a big thing, I think, for parents too. Saying yes to the support, saying yes, take my children.
Right. Totally.
For me. So they can also have some time alone to bond with the baby without having to worry about, the other children all the time.
Right. Well, and having a lot of tools to try out and use, right? Like there's so many times in parenthood, especially first-time parents, myself included, that you have a certain way and all right, this is what we're going to do. And then when it starts going sideways and it's not working in the way that you do, there's a stress around, okay, I'm doing this wrong. Whereas it might just be like, all right, we need to do it differently. And so like with all the things that you added in today, being able to have a bunch of different approaches and different tools to be able to ease that transition. And I think in the bigger picture too is understanding it is a transition and you'll find your new way. It's just a matter of supporting each other through that as healthy as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, the sport's a key thing. And also it's really interesting to note that, what worked for your first child isn't going to necessarily work for your second. So really being able to tune in to your intuition with what your child needs, trying not to get caught up in doing things a certain way. Having some kind of flexibility really helps, because I don't think you'll ever really know what to do until your child comes along and you see what personality they are and how they respond to certain things. So really being able to, I guess, not be rigid in our approaches and our ways of parenting, because sometimes children in the same family need to be parented in different ways. I'm still learning these sort of things, with all of my children. So that's a good thing to sort of keep in mind, that they're not going to necessarily fit into the way that you expect your parenting style to
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of all the tools and that parents can use, tell us more about your book, where people can get it, because that's exactly what you put this all together for.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I just released my book called Sleep, Play, Love, which is the same name as my business, and it's available on Amazon, Kindle and paperback now, and you can just search for Sleep, Play, Love. It comes up. And yeah, that was basically a 3-year project for me. And in between having a few children and everything else like that. But yeah, I think it's my intention with that book was to really answer all the questions that I've been asked in the last 5 years of sleep consulting and working with parents on in different questions around behaviour and transitions, and try and provide options and different provide methods to help parents navigate those changes, and the connection tools are really clearly outlined there, so hopefully if it helps one parent, right?
Yes, no, absolutely.
That's enough.
I'll make sure the links are there for the listeners here, that to the website, to the Amazon link. I didn't realize it was out in paperback. That's great. I have a Kindle version of it. It's a great resource. So I definitely encourage you listeners to, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a great resource. And again, I appreciate you today coming on to be able to talk about this subject, because again, just even in the last 2 months, I've had a lot of listeners requesting hey, would you be able to do something about this? Because this is coming up in a couple months. So once it's out there, you'll be able to help a ton. And I'll obviously leave a link to your website to be able to connect with you personally, doing some one-on-one work that you do. Yes. What's the major message you'd like the listeners to come away with about what we talked about today, or maybe even something we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure that the parents that are listening hear?
I think I've covered support and intuition. I think that's really important, but also for mums, and I know, having been through this experience, and how vulnerable you feel, after birth, and all the emotions that you're going through yourself, and you've got hormones flooding you, and you've got this brand new baby, and you're dealing with dealing with a toddler as well, and their expectations and needs and feelings, and just go easy on yourself. You don't have to. No one's expecting anything from you. If you end up with in your pajamas all day for 5 days in a row, it doesn't matter. Just right. Really just enjoy the time. It goes so fast. I know everyone says that, but with the right support, if you can get support to help out, because don't forget that having other people to help out, to play with the older children, can help a lot. So you don't have to be the only person who is responsible for the play and the connection. They can get connection from other people. So just being easy on yourself and know that you're doing enough and that you're doing your best.
And oftentimes I've heard that this is a great time that the older sibling and dad get a lot of bonding time, because mom's doing more with feeding and the newborn, and that really strengthens the bond with dad.
It does. I think I've lost all of my children to my husband. Every single time I've got one, the last one is mine, because I'm not having any more.
But, right, they're all turning them over.
Kids now.
Are they? That's cute.
So I think it's nice, absolutely, and I think it's lovely for for the father to have that role, where he gets to have that bond with the older child. And you mean that's something you can even encourage, during pregnancy too, is getting dad, if he's not already, a lot more involved. So it's not obviously, they feel outcast when the baby comes because it was all mum and then suddenly it's all dad. So, making that transition gradually is a really good idea.
Very good.
Yeah.
And what about for the baby that might be listening? What little words of wisdom do you have that you like to whisper to them?
My little darlings. Mum's doing her best. Mum is doing her best, and enjoy this world.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Sophie, again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dr. J.
We'll connect maybe on another episode. We can talk more about the parenting pike connection. I know that's something that's really important to me and to all the parents, of like being connected and using that way of helping guide and direct and just have more fun together. So I'd love to have you back.
Yes. Oh, I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Hi, it's Dr. J again, and I want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I, as a parent, learn a ton from these experts coming on and sharing their wisdom, so I hope you're getting a lot out of it too. And I want to share something else with you. I've created a guide called the 40 Ways to Connect with Your Baby During Pregnancy. It's full of simple things you can do on a day-to-day basis that will help strengthen that bond that you have with your baby. It's a free download. You can go to my website at drjwarren.com/40ways and just enter your email. I'll send it right to you. You can download it and start working on it right away. All of the research that I'm learning in the fields of epigenetics and attachment parenting is showing that the more bonded you are during your pregnancy with your baby, the better the birth is going to go and the better parenting is going to go, because you have that strong foundation, a strong connection to build upon. So go again to my website. It's drjwarren.com/40ways and get that free guide. And again, thanks for listening.